Tim.
Hello, everyone. My name is David DiLorenzo of Association Analytics, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our virtual discussion series, where we bring together leaders and learners each week in fun and engaging sessions aimed at optimizing business results and staying relevant in challenging times. We hope you have your glass of wine or tea or coffee or whatever you need to keep you going on a Thursday afternoon. Today's session is about how to plan and execute winning virtual events that fit your goals, your audience, and your budget. Just a note that there is going to be a recorded version of this webinar, so if you have to jump off early, we will send you a link when that is available. And this is interactive, so during the session, we want to hear from you. Use the chat tool to connect with the panelists, with each other, all throughout the webinar, and also use the Q&A button to submit questions for the panel. We'll be answering some of those live during the session, and I'll also troll through the chat button to look for questions. And now, without further ado, I would like to introduce today's presenters. First, we have Greg Pollock. Greg is A2's Vice President of Sales. He's worked with associations and not-for-profits for 15 years, including the Boy Scouts of America. He switched over to the vendor side and worked in implementation, product development, and finally in sales. He loves to talk about technology and how it can impact a business. And as many of you remember from a few weeks back, he is a Mazda Miata enthusiast and racer. I'd really love to tell you about that all again. Greg is joined today by Liam O'Malley from A2's partner Blue Sky eLearn, where he is the Vice President of Association Solutions. With over 15 years of experience working with associations and nonprofit organizations on a variety of technology initiatives, Liam brings a broad range of industry expertise and technical skills that help Blue Sky clients choose the right solution and begin their journey on the right foot. So once again, for those of you who are just now joining us, welcome to this virtual webinar, Getting Creative with Virtual Events. Now, I'll turn it over to Greg.
Awesome. Thanks, David. I'm loving the chat already. Welcome, everybody. Give a shout out and tell us where you're from. I saw somebody scroll by that was from Zimbabwe today watching. I see Gaithersburg, Alexandria. Awesome. Not only do I love Miatas, I love trade shows. I started my career on the trade show side, and there's a picture of me. I'm not that young anymore at a trade show. I've saved every badge for every trade show I have, and I have like 350 badges from trade shows I've been to. So I've got this big mosaic I'm building for my wall that I will have in the background. I invited Liam O'Malley to this conversation because right now virtual events are really hot. And talking with Liam, there's a lot of questions out there about what a virtual event is. So Liam, could you give us a little background on Blue Sky and virtual events before we jump into the content today?
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you, Greg, for inviting me on today. Thank you, David, for that great intro. And thanks, A2 team, for giving us this opportunity to chat with you about these really, really important things that we're seeing happening. So just a little background on Blue Sky, who we are, what we do. We've been around close to 20 years now. And that first 10 years of the company really was focused on providing lots of virtual event solutions, hybrid event solutions, on-site support. We were producing CD-ROMs for folks, DVDs, all of that good stuff. And that has evolved a lot in those 20 years and interestingly enough, evolved a lot in the past couple of months. And then in 2013 or so, we produced a new learning management system known as Path. So Blue Sky is an e-learning company, and we approach virtual events from a learning perspective. I'll talk a little bit about the idea of virtual learning events and what your approach to events might be based on those various different things. And then we can talk about kind of how we pick apart areas that we might be able to address those with you. So yes, thank you, Greg. Thanks, David, and the rest of the A2 team for having us.
Awesome. So let's jump into the content. The reason we put this webinar together is there are a lot of organizations right now who may not be having that physical event that they were planning for the next month or two, or they may be planning for their fall event and still wondering what's going on. And we wanted to take a data-driven approach to really understanding what the impact of not having an event might be on the organization. But also, if we're going to plan a virtual event, what should we actually do? How do we actually make that successful? If I've never done that before, what do I need to know? We're going to start from the data perspective. And then I'm going to tag Liam in, and we're going to talk about what you can actually accomplish. A ton of different options out there as well. Now, we don't have kind of a patent on good knowledge, so that's where the chat comes in. As we're walking through this, we'd love to hear your experiences. If you've done some of the things we're talking about, if you don't like what we're talking about and you have a better idea, throw it out there. Or if you have different ideas and we haven't brought them up, throw them in the chat. Let us know what you're thinking and let us know what your organizations are doing and how you're measuring these sort of things and how you're putting together the programs. So the first question we really want to ask is, what is the core purpose of your conference? So of all the events I've gone to, I think there's three main things we do at events. We go to educational sessions, we get our CEU credits, we learn. We go to the trade show, we talk to exhibitors, we interact with sponsors, and at the same time we network, we connect with other individuals, we talk with other people. So the first question we have is, if we're going to convert our virtual event to a physical event, we really flip that. We really need to understand what the goal of your event is. And I don't think most conferences have one goal. I think there's a blended modality of goals here where we're accomplishing a couple of these things as we go through it. And then the question becomes, can we do all of those things in one virtual conference, or do we need to break them apart? Do we need to have different strategies for how to do that? Barb, we're going to talk about revenue in 1 second.
Yeah, and Greg, I would add here, I think that also recognizing that, you know, no two conferences are really created equal. And so a lot of the conversations I'm having now is around, you know, what are people looking for their virtual conference? What's important? What are the trends you're seeing? What are people asking for? And it, just as no two physical conferences are the same, no two virtual conferences are the same, really. It's a different experience for your members. Your members are looking for different things. The weighting of those three components is different for every event. Is the focus really the trade show? Is the focus really the sessions? It all shifts around a little bit, and you have a very broad set of tools that you can look at technology-wise to facilitate those needs. But the key point being here, kind of take it back to its fundamentals of what you're providing. What's the value here for your members that you're really creating?
Love it. And Bruce is talking about sponsors. We're going to get to sponsors in 1 second. So the first thing I'd ask is, understand the impact not having your physical event has on your membership. One of the associations I looked at in preparing for this, actually 88% of their members didn't attend an event at all last year. So some people are saying, we're not having our physical event, the world is ending. Well, not for those 88% of members that didn't go at all to an event last year. They may not even notice a difference. But also the data I looked at, 2% of them are attending your virtual conferences and 10% are going to physical. So if we look at that breakup, there's a fairly good opportunity here for us actually to expand the pie. One is we want to get something in front of those people who are used to coming to our physical event. But the other is we want to continue to get people to attend our virtual events. Now, when I started in the event industry back in 2006, 2007, people said that the sky is falling with virtual events. If we have an online event, it will cannibalize our physical event. And to be honest, that just hasn't happened. People were concerned about Twitter. Well, if they can consume the content on Twitter, why would they come to the physical event? I think there's a Twitter chat for every physical event that happens right now. And a lot of the time, the virtual augments the physical and they play off both of each other. I also think we have the opportunity, and if you attended the session we did with Kyle a couple weeks ago, where we talked about expanding the pie. We actually looked at the people who attend virtual don't always attend physical. Can we retrain our attendees and get them into a new mode so that they get used to taking online courses? That becomes something they're used to doing on a regular basis. When we flip back to the real world, we can then have more of our attendees taking those virtual conferences than we ever did before. So first up, we've understood the impact this is having on our members, who's coming, who's not coming. Then we start to actually get into the impact on revenue. And we're going to look at revenue in two separate ways here. The first is, how much money did our organization generate from attendees coming to this? What was the revenue breakdown of our organization from a totality? So what are all the things we sell? What % of that revenue came from our event that we need to recuperate? Was it growing? Was it shrinking? How many attendees were actually affected by not having that? All of these things we need to start looking at, because if we don't understand the problem, we can't start to address the problem. So first question is, what % of our attendees, our members were impacted? What % of our revenue was impacted? Let's put a number behind that. And here we're going to put a number in registrations at $4 million. And we're going to say it was on the up and up, where we're growing. We're also going to put a number on the number of members that were affected. These 8,000 people went last year. They didn't get to go this year. So how do we then start to create programs for those people? Somebody talked about it in there. You can't just think about the impact on your attendees. You also have to think about the impact on your sponsors. I think Reggie talked about this in our first virtual happy hour. As an association, we support the ecosystem. It includes both the members and the sponsors, and we need to find new creative ways to get that sponsor in front of our members. We can't come back from the COVID experience and not have any vendors out there. That wouldn't be a healthy ecosystem. Now, peeling the curtain back, I'm a sponsor. I used to go to a lot of trade shows as an exhibitor. I buy sponsorships at trade shows. And I'll tell you right now, I'm looking for new creative ways to spend those sponsor dollars. They were still budgeted and allocated. I need to find new creative ways to spend them. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and call your sponsors and ask them, how can we help get you in front of the members? There's a fairly good chance they still want to get in front of people. And there's a fairly good chance they have a new and updated message that's completely different than what they were talking about 6 months ago. How do you unlock that message and actually get it in front of your members? I'll give you one example. If you were on last week's session, we had a sponsor at the end of that, Feather, come in and talk about what they're doing now and how ad retargeting is helping them. They've got a new message, right? They want to get that in front of their members. So reach out to those sponsors. The other thing I'll say is we sort of have this license to do things we weren't allowed to do in the past. Thinking about legality of this, I know some organizations can't legally do this, but there's always been this wall between content and sponsorship. And I think it's okay to start breaking that wall down a little bit and letting the sponsors into content. As long as we're open and honest about what's happening, I think it's okay to position a sponsor in front of content and say, hey, we're supporting this sponsor, supporting the content. The reason you got to come as an attendee for free is because this sponsor paid for this session to happen. Give them 5 or 10 minutes, listen to their new message. The other piece of this is people are still buying solutions to help solve their problems. People have new problems they weren't looking into solutions for before. If we can get these sponsors and their new message in front of your members, we can continue to create value. So don't forget the sponsors, whether it's including them in the webinar, whether it's letting them talk, or whether it's just giving them access to the list. To be honest, having one of my guys stand at a trade show booth for 5 hours and try and talk to people as they duck him and walk down the aisle, that's one option, and you can scratch down their business cards and get their names. Or you can give us the registration list from the event and we can call people and email them afterwards. Either of those work for me, as long as you still give me as a sponsor an area where we can participate. So then other questions we want to ask are things like event loyalty. If we've identified those 8,000 people that typically come to our conference, how many of those people come every year? How many of those people come year after year after year? I know if I go to ASE Annual, I'm going to see Liam there. Liam's one of those members that goes every year. So there's one message I might need for those people. The other side of this is how many of those people are net new? And we don't want to forget the people who are net new, the first year members. We want to make sure they get a fantastic opportunity to participate. We then want to look at things like meeting overlap. How many people came to last year's event that came to the previous event? How many people come to our virtual event that also come to our physical event? Getting an understanding of the overlap those sort of things happen allows us to start planning how we're going to market to the attendees at our virtual events. And then we start to look at how do you eat an elephant? One of my favorite answers is one bite at a time. If you were to ask me to throw a virtual event for 8,000 people, I wouldn't know where to start. I'd freak out and I would start to shut down and I would say, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to plan that. But what if we break those attendees into buckets and into bite-sized pieces? So now what if I told you, you need to plan a virtual event for 526 people and you need to focus on a topic that they're really interested in. Here's a natural community within your population that you can really focus on. Well, now it's like, okay, I can start to understand that. I can plan a virtual conference for 526 people. We've got over 300 people in the call right now. We're halfway there and we're doing pretty well. So now we've got our 526 people. Again, that might seem like a lot of people, but if we segment them down and we leverage something like engagement scoring, we can identify the, 10 people that are highly relevant within that population. So here I used an engagement score on that population of people, and I came up with 10 people. Some of these people are speakers. Some of these people are exhibitors. Some of these people are sponsors. Some of these people are attendees. These are the people who are willing to help me make sure this event is successful. We didn't get this virtual event series up without asking for help. this is the same thing you can do. Those people who were attendees in the past, those are your social media influencers. Those are the people who can wrangle other attendees and get them to come. They can help you write your marketing copy. They can help you amplify this on social media. You've got your potential sponsors listed out. How do they want to get involved? How can they best help you get this up and running? Maybe it's with dollars, maybe it's with content, get them involved. So now we've got something that seems a little bit more digestible. We've got a smaller population we need to target, and we've already got some champions that can help us do that. Now let's take that one step further, and let's use data you already have in other platforms to help figure out what we should be doing. So I went into the LMS module, and I found other learners who have that same demographic in that community we've identified. So these 2,226 people have already taken online courses. What did they take? What sort of content were they interested in? Did we buy it? Did they sell it to them? Did they buy it from us? Was it free? Did they access it in combination with other things? Was it a gateway course that got them started? How do we then leverage the information we already have about that population to try and come up with the right message or the right content for them? I also have data from a great source, my online community. So what are people with this demographic or category talking about? And I used a date filter here. I didn't say, what are they talking about over the last 10 years? I said, what are they talking about over the last 3 months? Since January, what is the most important topic that these people want to understand? And I've probably got 20, 25 different sessions I can come up with right here based on what these people are talking about right now in the community. How can we get content in front of them that's most relevant for them about what they're looking for right now? So that was a lot of content. I'm going to pause for a second, take a sip of water. Any questions from the group, David, that we missed?
Yeah, a couple things. So I can answer a little bit for Hilly, but for the betterment of the group, when you put up a graphic, Greg, about non-attendees or people who may not be engaged in general, and I thought what you guys' thoughts about that, were you looking at the data? I mean, my perspective for the group was a lot of people aren't engaged in events, but you have a broad swath of offerings as an association. Whether we look at data across all of our clients and we see people that may not be engaged in any events, and they really can be engaged in community or certifications or downloading things from your website, or just buying content off your website, such as publications and things like that. So just because they don't attend an event doesn't mean they're the unengaged.
David, I threw that in there to be controversial because I knew people that would rub people the wrong way. I wanted people to realize that the sky isn't falling.
Well, I'm glad I could answer it for you.
People engage in lots of different ways with your organization, and just because they can't come to the physical event this year doesn't mean they can't engage in dozens of other ways and find tremendous value from your organization. I also think this is a great opportunity for us to focus on those other things that members really want to do. The annual conference gets so much publicity because it makes up a large portion of the revenue, and that's important.
Yeah.
But we have to actually look at, like, what are all the things our members do with us that they find valuable? How can we expand our footprint in those areas?
Yeah, and most of the comments and questions are things I know you guys are going to cover, like, how do you bring awards into a virtual world? How do you do these things with a smaller staff? There's been a lot of comments, and I know you guys are going to get to it, so get back to it.
Awesome, thanks, David.
Yeah, and
So,
Greg, I think to your point on that question too, I would just say it goes back to your earlier comments about not cannibalizing your attendees, right? Those folks are out there. They might not be coming to every event. They might not be buying every product. But when you look at what happens after 2020, where do we go from here? Nobody has a crystal ball for that. But what we feel pretty confident telling you is that it's not going to go back to 2019. This is going to change what people expect out of an event for the long-term, maybe permanent run for the foreseeable future. So when you look at what are our different ways to provide these things for people, that is a great growth opportunity for your organization, for your overall engagement across your members. And you also have to look at what is our spend now with the event, right? We're not having a physical event this year, maybe.
Yeah.
So that's going to drastically impact what your outset is. So your margin may be totally different than what your margin was, in 2019. So those are all things you need to consider then from a revenue perspective. And is the value of your event about having a great party that everyone remembers next year when registration time comes? Or is the value of your event about having you know, a good margin and a successful event and a way to build revenue for your organization to drive their mission forward?
Yeah, and I would add, Greg, you hit a point earlier that I know you guys are going to talk a little bit about, but if you think about how your large annual conferences and events grew and added more things because everybody was in one place, so you just started doing more and more things there. This gives you a chance to break those things up. You don't have to do everything all at once. It does not have to be a big virtual event. You can find ways to handle roundtable discussions in one venue and maybe different platforms. And you find the things around the event you want to create virtually. And I think that's what you're going to talk about, Liam.
Yeah, actually that's a perfect segue to these next couple of slides, David. So, you know, one of the first things that I do want to talk about is what does virtual conference mean? What does virtual events mean? What does webinar mean? What does live streaming? How do we define all of these words? You, as an organization, as an association, you get to define what that means for your members because you're the one creating this event. So what is a TLA virtual conference? What is an ABC virtual conference? What do these things look like? And let's take what we used to do in person and start to pick that apart and get to a point of, these things make sense to do all in a day sequentially. These things make sense to do in a 6-month series. These things make sense to pre-record and post all at once. These things actually make sense to turn into an LMS course. All of the above is included potentially in a physical event. So you look at what that was and how that grew and how you got there, and then you explore this whole new tool set that will have an impact on how people engage in it, what your financial outsets are for it, what your longevity of the content looks like, and all other different implications. So when I talk about having that conversation with people, what it looks like is, all right, let's start from that agenda, or let's start from that draft agenda, and we'll look at what's made up there, and we'll look at, again, generally three different things of the conference: the sessions, the education, being one of them, the networking being a second one, and then the exhibitors and the sponsors being the third. Now, posters, awards, there's obviously tons of other things involved there, but those generally are the three big ones that people are seeing as their traditional value drivers for an event. So this agenda, actually, keep us there for a minute.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. So this agenda, Texas Library Association, we put on an event with TLA last week, just happened. And I like to show this agenda because I think they did a great job of breaking up the content between, they did some live stream, fully produced solution for their opening, for their keynote, for some highly interactive sessions in the afternoon. But then they pre-recorded everything else in their educational sessions. So they minimized the impact and cost outset of those educational sessions, and they created an event over 2 days where they could have dynamic, engaging live components, and then set a break specifically in an agenda to say, okay, now here's your hour to go check out the pre-recorded sessions, watch whatever you want. And then in the afternoon, now here's your hour to go check out the exhibitor showcase, check out whatever you want. And it does a good way of breaking up the content and making it feel like you're not necessarily just, sitting there at your desk for an 8-hour stream all day long for, 2 or 3 days at a time, right? That's another example of why, like, what worked in person maybe doesn't make sense online anymore. And I'd like to mention also, like, as we see us as technology partners, us as association staff, our lives are changing. We're doing the best we can as this evolves. All of your members' lives are changing drastically as well, right? They're at home with their kids, with their dogs. They have, young children at home. It's much harder, or at least different, to engage in that content in dedicated time like it once may have been. So that's where looking at spreading this content out over time, or pre-recording it, or delivering it in other ways is definitely something worth evaluating.
I wanted to bring up one point from the comments. Somebody said that their bylaws don't allow them to mix the sponsor content with the content. Yeah. And what a great time to change those bylaws, right? They were probably not built for the COVID world. It doesn't hurt to ask, can we change those? Can we get a waiver for those? Right now, we think this is not necessarily the best time to have this rule. How do we get that process kicked off so we can change those, so we can have better rules for today? And we can go back to that when the time's right. But right now, we need to change the way the rules work. Everybody's asking to change things.
Those same bylaws might not allow for virtual voting on bylaw changes.
That's a good point. Yeah, no, that's a great question. Like in bylaws, and honestly, you know, we work in the continuing education space a lot, right? As an eLearn company, that's often a requirement for CLE or CME, legal, medical credits, etc., of on a state-by-state basis of whether you can have promotional content, whether you can have sponsorship content, how you can address that. So I'll talk about that in a couple minutes, but as Greg says, it's time. It's worth having the conversation at the very least about that stuff.
All right, we've got a twofer coming up. Laura asked, how do we encourage participation in the virtual exhibit hall? We're going to get to that. But somebody else asked, how do we get more participation of our sponsors? I see two problems that have one solution. Your sponsors can be the moderators of your breakout sessions as a sponsorship opportunity. As they go to those breakout sessions, there's a natural community who wants to go into that breakout or that subgroup. The sponsor is moderating that session, mini commercial at the front end. A lot of times us sponsors have a lot of insight. We've been doing this for a while. We talk to hundreds of associations. We can probably moderate a breakout session for you, and that's a great sponsorship opportunity. You've got a reason to go into the breakout session. You've got a reason to talk to the sponsor, and I'm happy to moderate that breakout session and get the conversation going for you. 2 for 1 right there.
Another opportunity there, Greg, some of the questions were around networking in the virtual world. That's what's missed, the hallway conversations. And that's another opportunity to engage sponsors and partners. You know, everybody's doing Zoom happy hours and all kinds of just virtual informal discussions. What a better way to engage than have open forums and things online as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we got a couple sponsor slides coming up, Greg, if you want to move us forward. These are my timely relevant sponsor slide deck. This is I got jokes. We can just move beyond this. All right, come on, keep it going. Keep it going. You got sponsors, they're important, right? So what are your tools that you have today? And what is your approach to support this event moving forward, right? So again, Blue Sky, we come at this from an education angle. We have an LMS product. So we look at what we can leverage within that LMS product. And there's a lot of things in order to support that for a sponsor. We're not going to be a solution for virtual avatars walking around in an exhibit hall that's got you that full Sims experience. And maybe that's what you need. And maybe this solution isn't right for you. That goes back to looking at what's the value of our show? How do people get what they need to get out of our show? That's going to be a better fit for some organizations. But if you think about what are traditional LMS tools and traditional LMS functions, and how can you leverage that for a sponsor? You can create areas where the sponsor can own a space or traditionally a course. You don't need to call it a course. It can be whatever it wants. You can put a link, HTML, a presentation, a recorded video, a couple minutes of video. You might even allow them to have their own webinar hosted in that space or their own live stream event, a Zoom call, or whatever it might be. Allow them to have that space. I'm going to go on to the next slide here, and you look at, then you can also break that out into your various different sponsor tiers. And in those tiers, those people might have different functionality assigned to them based on what their levels of sponsorship is. And then I like to show this and talk about, you know, what is your t-shirt canon, right? Everybody loves a t-shirt canon. Everybody loves gamification. And especially when we talk about how do you get people to your exhibit hall, right? How did you do that in person, right? It was lunch. It was breakfast. It was drinks, right? You got to do something. You got to incentivize people. You got to get them over there and talking to people. So looking at how you can be creative with that online and thinking through options. I went to a ton of shows last year, and probably 9 out of 10 of them had bingo card stamps for their exhibit hall. Super popular right now. Well, that translates really well to an LMS environment, translates really well to a system that tracks who's watching what, who's completing what activities, who's engaging with which exhibitors. You give them a graphic, a certificate, they can have your own design, whatever, and we'll mail you a t-shirt. We'll mail you some swag. I guarantee your sponsors have a closet full of stuff, hopefully that doesn't have 2020 dated on it, because it's going to be short-lived for this year. But you know, that's an option where you can get creative with what you're doing, and maybe it's not swag, maybe it's a, you know, a registration discount or a renewal discount or what have you. Again, just being creative, and also communication. So really the theme here that I would like to get across is engage your sponsors in these conversations as you're evaluating your options and looking at what the opportunities are for them. As Greg said, as a technology partner in the space, we're all looking at new stuff too. We've got new messages, we've got new channels we're talking to, we've got new conversations happening, and we're going to be engaging in all sorts of different virtual conferences throughout the year and virtual events throughout the year. And some things are going to work well for us, some things aren't. So it's really difficult, I would say impossible, to have a 100% perfect event. There's just so many things going on. So the biggest parts are communicating what you're doing and why you're doing it, and then asking for feedback after the fact. How can we do it better next time? There's always room for improvement. Bring those people into your conversation.
Hey, Lee, I mean, in that vein, how do you, question from the audience, and I'll just generalize it, but how do you get the so-called, what we've been hearing for years, the non-technical members ready for, a switch to a virtual conference? If they're slow, they haven't ever used the conference app, and this is not only just different from what they're used to, but not even good adapters of technology. Are there trainings? Do you help organizations prep their attendee or potential attendees for what to expect? And I know one thing I've noticed, everybody's in this virtual world now, the level of expectation for perfection is gone. So it's okay to not make everything perfect, and maybe you seize that opportunity.
Yeah,
and prepare them.
And on a personal level, that's one of the things that I, am appreciating, seeing some reality being brought into that space for people with, we're going through things, we're doing things live, we're having this talk here. It's just like we might be sitting down, at a table at a conference or something like that, right? Challenging question. There's always going to be some margin of folks that are going to take longer than others, and definitely know your audience, right? Know what your members are like, know what they're going to expect, and think about that as you make the decisions, right? Don't buy the latest and greatest high-tech thing out there that is going to be super flashy when nobody's ever going to use it, nobody's going to log in. But then also think about what your tech environment looks like already. And don't ask them to get a new login. Don't ask them to register again. Integrate as best you can. Lower as many barriers to engagement as you possibly can. And then, some of it is just communication, again, instructions, documentation, instructional videos. Get that stuff out there as much as you can with people. And the folks that are really looking for that value are going to come along one way or another, whether they like it or not, because that's what's happening this year, and that's what's happening moving forward. That's what we're dealing with. And again, on a personal note, I've had Zoom calls over the past month with people I never thought I would see on a Zoom call. So there you go.
100%. And Cindy, how do you get them to use it? I would, ask, hey, can you share your webcam? We've been doing, can you share your webcam at every meeting? And it went from one of those things where I was the only person on the call with my webcam on to everybody does it now. But I also wouldn't assume that the reason they don't have their webcam on is because they don't want to share their webcam. They may not know how. They may not have ever done that before. This may be new for them. And we may have to go and train them how to do that in a very polite, very sensitive manner. Begin your conference with, here's how you attend the conference. Here's how you use your computer correctly. Here's how you use your webcam. Here's how you make sure your audio is correct. We're going to talk about that from a speaker perspective in a minute, but from an attendee perspective, it's equally important. Just like we had maps for how to walk around the physical trade show, and we had a guide on what sessions are when, we can have a virtual guide. How do you attend the virtual conference correctly? How do you ask questions? How do you make sure that you're engaged? Should 300 people have their webcam on or just the speakers? How does that work? I think all of those are reasonable things to try and tackle in the new normal.
Yeah. All right, so actually this is great because we had the question about bylaws and about mixed content. And actually, if you look at how you can be creative with it, this is again using traditional LMS tools to put a space for sponsors in front of your content, but not blending it. So if you look at that example there, all that is that's just a posted video as a requirement for accessing your live stream. Right? So you got to watch this 2-minute video if you want to get into the live keynote, or you got to watch this thing. It's not the same content. It's a different recorded video. It blurs that line in a way that, from most of the restrictions I'm aware of anyway in the CE space, is totally legit. And it is a model that people have used in the past as well. So looking at that, maybe we're not allowed to invite the sponsor into the stream or into the webcast or what have you, but we can certainly come close other ways. So looking at, again, putting those folks in front of that space in the right way that works for you based on the tools that you have available or the tools that you're looking at. And then on this slide also, we've got an example of, you know, end of the day, end of the track, we're gonna host a Zoom hangout. Now, on the networking piece, Zoom and other webinar tools are great for that with a couple of caveats, right? So one is, it's hard to get that face-to-face with anything short of that, right? And that's a lot of what's, there's a certain segment of people like, that's just what they need. That's what they need out of the event. If that's missing, take it or leave it. That's what they really wanted. They wanted to connect with their colleagues. They wanted to see people. They wanted to get that out of the event. That can absolutely be done and that can be pulled off well, but you got to keep your numbers in mind. You got to keep your facilitation in mind, right? You can't just say, hey, all 500, you know, you talked about segments earlier. We're going to have 500 product managers in this conference. All 500 of you join the Zoom and we'll all have a great old time, right? It'll be awesome. It's not going to work. So look at ways that you can even segment that out further. And some good examples of that could be, maybe it's your topical track for that day. Maybe it was a different track of sessions would have different Zoom rooms. Maybe it's different sponsors or facilitators would actually host those Zoom rooms. Maybe you, instead of having one at the end of the day, you have 5, and each sponsor has a 10-minute presentation at the start of one and then hosts it and facilitates it. And Zoom's got breakout rooms now. They can manage that kind of stuff. You can create those rooms. You can assign people tables that they would sit at a reception. Same basic concept applied there. So Zoom, webinar tools, GoTo, Adobe Connect, all have those kinds of tools in them, and they're kind of a pretty good fit for that stuff. You've also got traditional stuff that still applies. Twitter, back channel, hashtags, super huge at conferences. No reason why they can't still be when you have an event at that same time. Higher Logic or any community tools, online communities, Breezio, any of those pieces where you have that ability to connect people in a discussion area or in a community based on common interests that you know and the platform is aware of, based on the data, based on the behavioral analysis of what those folks are doing, put them in that space to have that side-by-side networking piece.
I was watching the slide, thinking about your chat, and I'm looking at the chat here, and there's so many great questions. I was like, wouldn't it be great to follow this virtual event happy hour we're having now with a conversation in an online community where we can dive deeper into some of these questions? Because I'd love to see some of the answers too. I don't know all the answers, but I've got a couple of these I want to dive into and talk about. I think that's pretty interesting.
Perfect example. Perfect example.
Or just an informal, and you raise everybody up into the video, Greg, and we just have a chat afterwards. Just like you would go out, into the hall after a session and keep on talking.
That sounds like fun.
There we go. There we go. I've got nothing to do tonight. Let's just hang out till it's over.
I'm good. I'm good at 4 o'clock. If anybody wants to stay in and get on
the virtual karaoke. I think that could be fun. We could do that.
I saw virtual karaoke go by.
Yeah.
This voice could not participate, but it'd be fun.
You have to be very liberal with the mute button if you're talking virtual karaoke.
Yeah. So as you guys are transitioning through, and there's a lot of good stuff, Liam, just touch on it quickly because I know we got to keep moving. But you know, how do you get buy-in, and how do you sell this internally to leadership that's not really excited about virtual events? I'm sure leadership and boards are all, the sky is falling. We don't have our event. You know, how do you? I see you breaking this up in the different aspects of it and breaking it down and the financial aspects of it. But how do you? Yeah. How else do you sell?
Yeah, dealing with board members. Okay, well, so that's a big question, and it's a funny space that we find ourselves in now here just at Blue Sky, because this is stuff we've been trying to get people to do this for decades, right? Mm-hmm. And the world is changing around us, and now I'm talking to folks that they've got some experience, or maybe they're experts at it, and they're just like, hey, we just need to do this stuff. We're good. Last year was great, and then we're talking to folks where we've been thinking about it for years. We're finally ready to take the plunge. And then we're talking to folks that are like scared out of their wits and being dragged into this space because this is where we are now. And you have a choice of adapting to that or just canceling, right? And there's definitely some organizations that I've talked to where they're just canceling and trying to recoup whatever insurance money they can because they can't try to make anything else out of it. And then, next year they'll try to come up with something. I don't know. I mean, right now, the answer to me is the board needs to do something. They have to act like it's less of a choice now to do something. Now, what they do, there's a million different choices there, right? And how you get them to adapt to those choices and come along in that conversation is a matter of, I would say, what any conversation with dealing with the board has been is do all your homework first and present them with what you think the best options are, and then try to get that buy-in from them at that point.
Byron, I think a little bit of this too is fear of the unknown. Create a virtual space for people on the board to experience what it's like and have a positive experience, and let them realize that this is something that's okay to do. I think people are naturally afraid of the unknown. They haven't done it before. They haven't experienced it. Give them a virtual experience that's positive and allow them to be successful with that. And then Carrie, right now what you're seeing in the background is the Blue Sky platform.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great point. Like, have a present all of this on a virtual meeting with your board, right?
Yep.
Show them. I mean, I probably already starting to get into that world now anyway, 2 months, 3 months in. So.
All right, we've got a lot of great content we plan to talk about, and we love the questions. Keep them coming. We just want to tackle a couple of these because I think they directly answer a lot of your questions. Yeah,
so we talked about exhibitors, some possible approaches for that. We talked about possible approaches for network. I want to focus in here in the last few minutes on the content itself and some of your options on how you produce the content, the streams, the pre-records, the sessions, and again, what I encourage people to do is look at their sessions that they had in an agenda on an onsite and see what maps to what different functions available for them in producing an event, because some of them are going to be a better fit for some strategies and others just aren't going to be a great fit for that strategy, right? A committee meeting at an onsite annual conference is going to be different than a keynote, is going to be different than an interactive panel. So we generally talk about 4 different approaches there. We talk about pre-recording and creating on-demand content and just posting it at the event or posting it over a period of time. We talk about using webinar technology. That's something that people can easily do themselves. They can self-manage it. They can pull together something on Zoom or Adobe Connect and create that experience. So a lot of associations already have at least some experience with that. You can also look at working with an organization like ours or others out there to produce that event with you. We'll talk about mock live, which is kind of a blend between pre-record and fully produced. You pre-record the session and you stream it at a certain time, so you can have a live Q&A and a live element to it. And then we'll talk about a fully produced live stream. The idea being that all of these things can work together. And it doesn't necessarily make sense to say my conference needs to be this one, or my conference needs to be this one, right? Because all your content in person, physically, it's all a different experience depending on what the nature of the session is.
We talked about this being new for you as an association, for the sponsors, for the attendees. Guess what? This is also new for your speakers. If you're a scientist used to presenting at a poster session, talking about lots of data, you may not be comfortable presenting in a live webinar in front of 350 people. So give them the ability to learn and make mistakes and figure out how to do this. I watched a great video yesterday about top tips for presenting webinars. I'm trying to follow them on myself today. So here you go. You don't need the best webcam in the world. I've got an integrated webcam on my laptop, and I think I look okay. You do need good lighting. I've got a light over here. I've got no backlight behind me, and I've got a second monitor. And I figured this out earlier. I can put a white screen up here, and I can be brighter or darker just by making that bigger or smaller. You don't have to get fancy with a really expensive light to make that work, but then you do need a good microphone. I'm not using the integrated audio on my laptop. I have one of those little plug your Jabra, you can't see it, there we go. Jabra headsets, that's all I've got sitting on my desk, and I think my sound sounds pretty good when I go back and listen to the recording. So some easy tips to help them get on. The other one is plug your laptop into the wall. Don't use the Wi-Fi in your house. You can avoid it. You don't want to have the speaker robot. So some easy tips to give your speakers to make sure their sessions are that much better.
Yeah. All right. So on demand. So pre-record that first tier. It works. TV is evolving. That's the obvious example. Look at Netflix. Look at your streaming services. People want things when they want things. I encourage people at the very least to offer on-demand elements of their conferences, especially as your members lives are changing. Be transparent about that's what it is, right? Don't try to sell it as something that it's not. But having that on-demand content can be very valuable for folks and can overall improve the retention that your members are getting out of their content because they can get it at any time they want. And it's also very cost effective, right? You can ask your speaker to record a session anytime on their own Zoom or on Camtasia or on Adobe, on Windows, whatever. Very simple. They can take as many takes as they want. Easy to do, easy to execute. Webinars. You don't have to call it a webinar. That's the first thing I say. There's definitely a contextual attachment to webinars. Think about maybe the historical context that your members might have about webinars. Have you had a highly successful webinar series in the past, or maybe a less than successful webinar series in the past? Whether you want to use that phrase or not is entirely up to you. However, the technology behind that phrase is still very applicable. We produce a lot of stuff on Adobe Connect, which is what you're seeing in front of you. As we've mentioned a couple of times, Zoom is pretty great. GoTo is great. There's a lot of tools out there. You can self-manage stuff, or you can lean on organizations like mine to help you produce them. And you can see here, you've got polls, Q&A, slides, you've got multiple webcams. It can do a lot for you. So definitely consider that as part of the potential puzzle for you. Then we had the idea of a mock live presentation. And a lot of folks are really drawn to this because it does allow your speakers to have that kind of minimized risk scenario where they can record it as many times as they want. They can get the session the way they want it. And then we stream it. We play it back at a certain date and time. So it is an event that happens and you need to attend it. And then we'll have a live Q&A or a live poll or a live chat, all of that happening at the same time. Have the speaker attend it. So you're blending the live engagement dynamic component of it with the minimized risk and the lower impact of actually pre-recording stuff, and allows you to have kind of a benefit of some fail-safe backup with the recording, as well as we're getting people engaged and getting people involved here.
All right, there's 300 of you on the call. I want lots of answers for Aaron's question. What are the best alternative words for webinar? I'm going to cheat and go with virtual event, but throw it in the chat there. Answer Aaron's question. I want to see this whole thing fill up with other alternatives.
I like that. I want to see that too. That's great. All right. So then at number 4, we have a fully produced live stream event. And this is where you have, multiple speakers, maybe coming from different locations. You've got a panel or a highly interactive session, or high profile. You want it really dynamic. You want it really engaging. And you're producing the actual stream with a lot of different moving pieces. If you go to the next slide, this is how the sausage is made for something like this. But at the front end, you're seeing a number of different people talking to each other as they would. There's a lot going on behind the scenes there. This is a picture, this is an event we put on a couple of weeks ago. I think it was like early March with AFP. And we're running this through Teams, but we do it through Slack or whatever. There's a back channel with the staff, the speakers, and our event production team. And we're talking about what's going on in the chat. We're bubbling up the questions. They're feeding that to the moderator, the MC, which is in Zoom window 1. You can see highlighted with the little red there, there's the live lobby slides, sponsor spool playing over and over until the session starts. Smaller in red in the upper left, that's your on deck screen that's coming next. Then you've got a speaker green room underneath where you're doing speaker audio, video check, make sure they're good. And then you're having each of those speakers come in through, maybe they're coming in through Zoom at their location. Maybe they're coming in through GoTo at their location, whatever it might be coming in. And then we produce that stream into that front end that you saw a minute ago. That's the kind of fully produced solution. And I like showing this screen because it helps, I think, make it click for folks to understand what this actually is. It's not that different from if we were hybrid or if we were doing this on site. You'd have multiple cameras, different shots, you were switching back and forth. Maybe you have a session in one room and a session in another room, but you're pulling it all together in a stream, and you're having an event production team working that stream to make that experience online a very compelling and engaging experience as well.
Awesome. Now, I made Liam put this slide in. This wasn't him promoting the guy. I said, Liam, some of this stuff sounds like I can do this. I could probably get a Zoom meeting with a chat and some moderators. I could have David intro us and monitor the chat. I think I can do that. That's 3 or 4 people. But some of the stuff you're saying, that sounds pretty hard. Somebody earlier posted, they've got a staff of 6. Yeah. So what are the other things I might want to engage an e-learning company in outside of the software itself? What other things can you do to help me be successful here?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll switch my background to my, I'm going to go full blue sky here for a few minutes at the end here. So Path LMS is our product, right? Path is the venue for delivering the content, integrates with your leading CRM partners, integrates with your community tools. That's your ecosystem to deliver any of those things. So in some of the earlier slides where you saw evaluations, surveys, certificates, sponsor stuff, that's all coming directly from Path LMS. That's what those screenshots are. So that's the product, right? That's how we deliver these events. Then we have a slew of services that might be applicable for these particular pieces of what we've talked about. With self-recording, with pre-recording, you can do that and post that to Path entirely yourself. It's just recording a video and uploading a video. If you want us to help your speakers record a video, we have a production team that can do that. We can edit it for them. That's certainly an option. Taking a couple steps up from there sequentially, as we took those sequential steps in the deck, you've got webinars and webcasts. That's also something you can self-manage, or you can lean on someone like Blue Sky to help produce for you. And when we talk about helping to produce a webinar, we're talking about technical support, backup, redundancy, high volume logins, high volume audio issues, making sure that all those really fun things about putting a webinar together are not on the minds of those 6 people trying to actually generate the content and work with the speakers to make it happen. And then all the way up to like a full facilitation, we can provide a moderator, we can provide someone to actually run that webinar for you if that's what you want. And then from the mock live streaming and the full produced live stream perspective, we walked through a little bit of what those look like. We can offer a number of different options in terms of training your speaker, pre-recording, live engagement, live tech support, all the way to the full event production team. Lastly, Blue Sky has also recently expanded to include a full learning strategy and design team, which can apply both to traditional educational content, LMS content, course development, curriculum, certificate development, as well as apply to actual event-focused content. Like I talk to people, you've got access to all the best brilliant minds in the industry. You've got your scientists, your engineers, they're putting together your content. They're often not the best people at creating a PowerPoint, incidentally, right? They don't have teaching experience, or they don't have marketing experience, or they don't necessarily know how to dress up their slides in a way that's engaging and compelling. That's an area where we can help. We can also help in the marketing and sales strategy for pricing the content, for creating the content. And that learning strategy and design is a really exciting space for us that we're growing as a company. So,
if that was too commercially for you, I apologize. I legitimately didn't know that I could get all those things. I made them do it. I didn't know all those were available, and I thought people would want to know that. And I really appreciate everyone blowing up the chat. I saw a lot of funny names in there and a lot of really good, serious names. Thank you all for participating in the chat. That was really exciting for me. So I want to go back to one of the themes we talked about. And I think we're good to hang out for a bit afterwards if people want to continue to ask questions. We're good to keep going if you want to hang out with us. I think the important message of our presentation today was try stuff. Look at your data and figure out what you want to do.
Yeah.
Experiment, try something different, try something new. Don't be afraid to fail, and tell the people on there, hey, we're trying this. We don't know if this is going to work or not. We really hope we're going to create value for you, and maybe we'll strike gold here. Get feedback from your members. Ask them what they liked, what they didn't like. Go through the chat and come up with your next topic. Go back and review the data and do it again. Go through this cycle until you come up with a product that you're really proud of and happy with. It's okay to make mistakes. Right now, we have a license to go out there and try things we've never had a license to do and say, listen, we're trying this to make a better ecosystem for you, for the vendors. We want you to know what's going on. If we didn't get it right, tell us, and we'll go back and fix it again. We'll go back and review the chat. We'll find another segment. We'll find another topic, and we'll do it again. But you got to hang out with us, and you got to give us the ability to explore and try new things. So I think normally at this point we go into our wrap up, but do we have other questions we want to jump into?
Yeah, we have some questions. Are you guys done with the presentation part? So a couple of them, pretty good questions. Are there any, and I know are there written standards or anywhere to go to help the quality of online content? I know, Greg, you talked a little bit about, you watched some videos. I mean, what are some tips, Liam, to Because sometimes it's, you got to get your audience ready, you got to get your leadership ready. And there's always, there's tons of things you can do just to get people to relax and be a good virtual presenter. Where can somebody go for that? I know I can say YouTube or anywhere else, but do you have any specific resources or links you can send us we can share?
I can send some, yeah, I can send some to you guys to share out and certainly provide some stuff. We've been creating some things ourselves. We've been working with some organizations to create some stuff. Some of it is organization specific. Some of it can maybe be repurposed that we can share. But yeah, honestly, think a lot of great content has been made in the past 2 months from organizations, from companies like Zoom, from companies like Adobe Connect, from companies that are doing that stuff. And so check out what they've been doing. Of course, it's going to be more generic, right? It's not going to be how ABC Association wants to put on their event necessarily, but a lot of it can easily be repurposed. And there's a lot of stuff, as Greg said, of like top 10 tips or things to think about to make your speakers think about. There's plenty of that stuff out there, and I'm happy to follow up with a little of the content that we've created. We've had a number of quite a lot of webinars that are sort of addressing this topic in the past 2 months, but we've also created some blog content and some other things I'd be happy to share.
And then the last question I had, well, we still have time, and then I'll do the wrap up. Pricing models, and somebody put the question, and I gave a little bit of an answer, but I'll let you guys jump on it, and then I'll give my opinion.
Yeah, I think in general, the things that I would encourage people to think about is that, you're still providing your members with something that they likely can't get in other places in terms of, especially if it's something like a credentials or credits or CEs in any ways. Think about what that value is that you're still delivering to them, and understand that you don't necessarily need to diminish or decrease your prices when you're still providing that value to them, when you're still providing that space to them. Like, to be totally honest, there are some events that I was planning on attending this year that I'm super excited about them being virtual only. I mean, and it's not even a reflection necessarily on the organization or the company or whatever. It's just, again, all events are different.
Yep.
All attendees to those events are different, and so the expectations are the same. So I would say there's a million parts to that question, but I would say first and foremost, like, don't default to feeling like you got to drop your prices drastically. Because
I would 100% agree. Just because this is something different, it doesn't mean it's it's less valuable. So you shouldn't cheapen it. And you're really only going to get one chance to set your pricing model. Because once you set a price, that's going to be the expectation for a while if you're doing more virtual events. So make sure you get the full value out of it. With that, it's 4 o'clock. Go ahead. You're going to disagree with both of us?
I'm going to disagree with both of you and say,
I'm going to mute you.
That's fine. Do you really need to charge for these events? I would argue give the content away for free and allow a sponsor to tag on and generate the revenue for you. Don't charge the attendees for them. Why not? What's the harm in doing that, right? The other side is come up with a price point and try them out. Try a webinar at $100 and try a webinar at $50. Try a webinar at $5 and see which one sells the most, see which one makes the most revenue for you, and stick with that price point. Have different price points available. Get a price point for a $100 webinar and spend 2 or 3 weeks refining the content and making it great, and have a webinar for $5 and put the content together in a day or two and see which ones your members like. There is no wrong answer here. Try different packages and see what you can come up with that makes the most sense for your members in the packaging they want. Maybe people really want the $100 webinar. Maybe people want to spend $1,000 to sit behind their screen all day long and look at content. Try it out and see what happens. Ask them what they want. If somebody wants to pay $1,000 for a webinar, we can put together some great speakers. We can have some great content out there that's relevant for you. So figure it out for you. I'd say there's no wrong answer here. The wrong answer is not trying.
Your ratings were so high on this event, Greg, until you said free. That's okay. But it's time to wrap up. As Greg said, if anybody does want to stay on, we can open it up and hang out for a little bit. But what an amazing session. I thank you guys for being our panelists. For our audience, I hope that your cups are empty and your brains are full. And I hope you can join us in the future for more of these discussions. We have created this as a recurring meeting. So when you sign up for this event, you're part of our all of our future events. You don't have to sign up again. You'll get a weekly notification with instructions. That's also how you're going to get the recording. We'll send you out a note that the recording is available. It's available on the same page where you signed up. And for our next installment in our webinar series, next Thursday, we're going to have data experts from 2 leading associations share their insights and experiences on projects that lead to analytics success. So once again, thank you, Liam and Greg, for an outstanding discussion. And it sounds like we might have to have a round 2 of virtual events here and check in with people again.
Right on. Well, thank you so much for inviting me on. It's been a pleasure, guys.
This is the most fun webinar I've had in a while. I thank everybody in the chat for participating. So many great questions. The chat blowing up with all the virtual event names was super fun to watch going by. I saw a lot of fun comments and I saw a lot of serious business comments. We are archiving all this. The video will be there. We're going to try and get the Zoomageddon chat there as well. Try and get some golden nuggets from there. And if you ask a question we didn't get to today, I'll go back through the chat and I'll read them and I'll try and send an answer to you. We'll try and make sure it gets posted up on that website there.
Awesome.
David, now that people are leaving, do we have anybody left? Are there any questions we wanted to tackle for the 100 and so people who are left?
Good question. I just closed the questions. But
I got it.
Literally just shut it as soon as you said it.
All right, we can get abstracts for webinars too, but that's separate from listed on the webpage. Let speakers know, not picking the event, consider. It's been great. I appreciate all the great.
The question was, that was a second part of a question. So one of the questions, maybe it's for Liam, and I answered it on the text chat, was how do you get people excited and encourage people to go ahead and submit abstracts when it's an unknown whether your event's going to really happen or not? You know, and some of the follow-up, what else, you know, if submissions are down, how do you get that picked back up?
Yeah, I think honestly, I would say think of the same kind of approach we talked about with sponsors, and that would go for abstracts, for posters, for those anybody you're trying to get to engage to create the content. Reach out to them and communicate with them about what they want and about what you're doing and what you're thinking and what your plans are, in order to just, again, communicate. Don't let it be an unknown whether your event is happening or not. Make a decision and put that in front of people. And whether it's one way or another, maybe there's still a plan B and plan C, right? But communicate what those are to people so that they know, I can at least do this with you guys, and so I'm going to plan for it.
Let me throw this out there as well. The traditional conference session, like the circle of having an event, is go out and get abstracts, review, grade them, create your sessions, get your speakers plugged in, have a physical event, rinse and repeat, and do it all over again. We talked about deconstructing that. You don't have to have A leads to B leads to C leads to D. Right. You could have a call for papers, pick a couple sessions, do virtual events, get people excited about how much fun those virtual events were and how valuable they were, and go get more call for papers. After we started this virtual series, we came up with a list of all the things we wanted to talk about. We've done the first couple. Well, guess what? People are asking, hey, can I be a part of the virtual hangout? Yeah. I have something I want to talk about. So like, we can go back and change what the new normal is. We don't have to have one big call for papers that leads to one big series of events. We can have events that showcase what our content's like and have that generate more session submissions. At the end of the day, you'll have more content than you can handle. If we just took all the questions in our chat here and turned them into 15-minute sessions, we'd have sessions until we couldn't talk anymore. So think differently than you used to think, and remove the constraints, right? Don't allow yourself to be limited by what you used to do in the past. Get creative and try new things, and use this as the ability to experiment with, why do we have one call for papers? Why don't we just, anybody wants to submit a session whenever they want, send it in. We'll evaluate at that point.
Learn to market to that too. And I think that's going to be some of the stuff is how do you, we didn't touch on that a ton, but how do you market to the change? And we've all been to, you know, I think of the hundreds and hundreds of events I've been to in my very long gray-haired career. And it's the same feeling that I get home every time. And it's the same feeling when I talk to people. God, it was just too much there. I wish I could have seen it all, but I couldn't.
Yep.
And everybody says that, and that's on evaluation. So when you think through, okay, wow, you have a chance now to completely deconstruct this, and you can sell that to the presenters. You're going to be in front of more people. You can sell that to everybody. You can eliminate all of the distractions of piling 47 million things into a 3-day event by spreading it over time, by breaking them up into logical buckets, by bringing more people in. That some people, you looked at the stat that Greg pushed out there at the beginning. Some people don't go to those events because they just can't handle that much pushed at them at one time. Whether it's, they don't like crowds, they don't like sitting in uncomfortable chairs for 8 hours upon end and day after day. They don't want to walk around a giant exhibit floor. There's tremendous opportunity there to break down barriers that people had just with live events and do it differently.
Well, and David, look at accessibility too. Like you kind of touched on it there. I mean, most major conference centers do a lot for that, but at the same time, you're going to lose people to that one way or another.
Yes,
so
you are.
Again, as you change venues here overall, as you look at these different options out there, expanding your reach, there's a lot of opportunity out there with that.
Yeah, and the bottom line is some people don't like to travel. And I think something we didn't touch on, I think one of the things that's going to lag around COVID for a while, that even when venues open and organizations are back to work, there are industries that are going to have travel restrictions. They're not going to take on the liability to send their staff or their people, or even the risk of getting people sick. They don't want to lose from productivity. They're not going to send them to a conference where there's crammed wall to wall with thousands and thousands of people and exposure. So it's going to linger on even when everything opens back up. So this isn't going away.
Yeah,
if you think back to like 9/11, and I remember that, it was a couple years before live events kind of picked back up. In reality, it really was.
Yeah.
I think over marketing it is key. Create a landing page that's easy to access with a short URL. Make it really easy for somebody who wants to jump into the content to get there. If I don't know there's a virtual event this afternoon, I can't attend it. So feel free to communicate, use different channels to communicate, use your influencers to communicate, create the most simple landing page I can get to, and just put the most relevant, up-to-date information on there. I'm a member of an association who's doing virtual events right now, and I couldn't find the next virtual event because it was tweeted, but it wasn't on their website, and they emailed it to me. But I was like, just every channel you have, email me at this point. I'm okay with that. Right. I just want to know what's going on so I can be a part of it.
And we've had a bunch of questions that were in there just around, and I think we've touched on it, but now that we're in after hours, and if anybody wants to raise their hand and jump on, I think Brian can probably bring them into the,
if you want to be our
panelist. If you want to be on video, jump in as a guest, just send a note to us on the panel and Brian will bring you in.
I want to answer this last question.
But I think the networking side, running into people in the corridor, I brought up that a little bit. This is kind of the hallway conversation right here. If you're setting up your virtual events, allow yourself, that's the other thing about the big events. You don't have time. Okay, you have 5 minutes to walk hallway across the convention center to get to the next session. You don't have time to talk. Think about the limitations that you have for networking at your events that people bring up to you, and build those into your virtual world. If you set up a half an hour informal place where everybody can just jump on video and talk after some sessions, or just create the happy hours that we've all seen all over Facebook. I think those are great opportunities to do that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I thought of a great app idea the other day. It'd be very short-lived, but if my phone could indicate to people when I actually get up off my chair and away from Zoom, and that's the time you can jump on a little chat with me automatically, it'd kind of be like that virtual, I'm walking through the hall until I get to my next Zoom call.
I want an answer to this one, Liam, because I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So this organization, we're being asked to go forward with our live event and have a plan B, which is a virtual event in place.
Mm-hmm.
It's not apples to apples, but thinking about our examples of 8 days, what is the cost of production? Is that a major concern for video streaming? Is it really that expensive to stream videos and have, dial-in numbers and experts and voiceover? Is it that expensive to do all that?
There are absolutely cost-effective ways to do it, and there are super highly produced ways to do it. So this goes back to what I was saying about, like, I get people coming in or going to our website and saying, hey, give me a ballpark for my event. It's 3 days and 200 sessions. I can't go anywhere with that, right? There's a million questions that you need to ask about. Let's unpack this. What are these sessions? Are they 20 committee meetings? Are they panel sessions? Do you want to pre-record? So again, going back to like, okay, what do the sessions look like? What's the goal of the sessions? Are they just straight education sessions, or are they something different? Is it a panel? Is it a forum? Is it et cetera? And then going back to those 4 modalities that we talked about. Doesn't cost you anything to pre-record and post something, right? Doesn't cost you well, it costs you very little to self-manage your own webinar using a webinar tool, right? You need a license for that, but generally it's pretty cost effective. And yeah, there are free models out there too. So there are absolutely ways to do this that will work within your budget. The trade-offs are going to be, you know, the more moving parts you have going on, obviously you're going to need more services, resources, you're going to need more staff to actually produce that with you guys. So generally, you don't want to throw that whole thing at every single thing that would have happened in your on-site meeting. And that's where that conversation comes in. Yeah.
We had somebody jump in. Alexis Seminaire jumped in as a panelist. You got to be on video.
Oh, boy.
Guest panelists need to be on video.
Hello.
What do you want?
Hey, Alexis.
Yeah, I had a question to ask the audience and of the panel. So you guys touched on it a little bit, but you know, as we're talking about engaging our sponsors and exhibitors in virtual events, and I'm really curious about that. And I know you guys go to a lot of events. So what are those examples of ROI that you're looking for, and what tech is out there, and how can people offer that to their exhibitors or their vendors?
I'll take a stab at it first. Speaking specifically as a, you know, as a technology partner, for me, the value is in getting my name and what we do and who we are and how we can help you in front of people, and having some kind of vetting of who those people are that are actually interested, so that when the time is right, we can continue that conversation with them. Now, that's a very broad answer, but it's intentionally broad because there are, I think, a lot of different ways to get to that. And whether that means, you know, I'm posting a recorded video of a 2-minute presentation about what we do and collecting names from that, or whether I have, you know, an animated sim in a virtual trade show and I get to walk around and, you know, interact with people in that space. Either one of those can really go for that same solution. And I think that also goes back to like, okay, what's the price point that our sponsors are contributing to this event for, right? What's the price point for our members? What's the product, like how much were we throwing at this on-site event? And that'll help you map to like, okay, now we can start getting to some decision points on this.
And I would say don't limit yourself to what a virtual trade show limits you, or what a trade show limits you to. We go out of our way to separate exhibitors and sponsors from education because of CE credits, or they get it. There's so many things on the exhibit floor that, you know, if they've got 5 seconds to grab somebody's attention as they walk by and show them a demo, be purposeful in what you're offering to them and think outside the box a little bit. Maybe it is exactly what it is. If you want to hear about content and a demo from your exhibitors, set that up so people can sign up and see who they want to see and spread it over a day, and give everybody 15 minutes of whether it's putting together a pre-recorded video to make it easy of here's some content and here's how our product or service affects that content, and let it actually be educational. It doesn't have to be all a sales pitch. And it's a totally different opportunity that you can't do it. You can't do it at a live event because you have so many restrictions around it. But now if you're thinking outside the box, you have tons of opportunity to engage exhibitors in a way different way to put them in front of your members.
Yeah.
Having exhibited so many times, I feel like a good sales pitch is an educational pitch. And I truly believe that if you're a good solution in the industry, you solve people's problems who don't know that those problems are solvable. I talk to people all day long who don't know that they can actually solve business problems they have using data, and they think that it's really expensive to solve those problems and it's out of their hands, and that's only for the Netflixes and the Googles of the world. And I think a real easy way is to identify people who have problems and identify sponsors who have those, who solve those problems, and put the two together, right? The reason we got blue sky on this is because how many people out there are running into problems with virtualizing their events and don't know the answers? We got a bunch of questions on here, and it's like, Liam gets these questions every day. It's like, well, how do I even ask the right question of Liam so he can even answer it? You know, I think that is where we solve the problem right now of ROI for exhibitors, is find the people who have the problems that need to solve them, find the people who solve those problems, and put the two in a room together so they can talk about it. So they can at least be educated on what the potential solutions are. And whether I'm talking with competitors and we're all saying, hey, this solution's solvable, you should just pick one of us and help you solve this.
Right, I said, there's tons about, do something different, do something outside the box. Here's a great question filled with irony. Zoom fatigue is real. any ideas on what we can do to make interactions more interesting, coming from someone who stayed on Zoom 20 minutes after the session was over. So.
I think virtual backgrounds are my So we have some virtual background contests on our meetings, whether it's choose your favorite 80s movie, post a picture of what you ate for dinner last night as your background, who can come up with the best joke. I think that that's a great way to make this more interactive and more fun for people.
Yes, we do that with our daily meets on Zoom. We have themes every day, so it can be a favorite 80s movie, like Caddyshack.
Yeah, I think the interactivity definitely takes the fatigue out of it, where you're actually engaging. You have the chat and the slides.
Yeah,
that's
Break
made it
it
a
up.
lot easier for me.
Yeah.
You can have your favorite cartoon.
So one last question for you guys. Have you seen any good examples of this that, you know, of either things that you've participated in or just things you've seen from the clients you work with?
I was on a great meeting at 1 o'clock today from ASAE Foresight Works that Julie, our CEO, presented with a couple people. It was one of those mock lives. They pre-recorded the content. They were posting in the chat, which being live in a session, it's really hard to be present in the session and look at the chat at the same time. I kind of wish we did that as well. So I think that was a great example of it. If you didn't have a chance to watch it live, go back and access it. It was ASAE Foresight Works, and it was super insightful. I took a ton of notes. I want to go back and rewatch it. It was so good.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, and I'll also just say too, I think Member Suites event is happening next week, which I'm kind of excited to see because I have this new thing that they're doing, partnering with the Echo for like a full kind of virtual, like that whole avatar Sims walkthrough kind of thing that we talked about a little bit.
I want to
and
go.
then
I've
within
never
that
been.
context, yeah, I know. I haven't seen what it is.
I mean, I
to
can get
much
on a
extent.
boat and sail around.
Apparently there is a motorboat at a beach that you can get on. That's what I've heard. That's what I have heard.
You want a virtual Miata?
I want a +5 broadsword so I can attack all the other exhibitors.
Yes, yes, there we go. You have to mod it a little bit. You have to write in your own hack, and then you can.
That's fine with me.
I think keeping it interesting is, you know, we talked about it a little bit, but it's keeping it real. I mean, I end up making light of it, but you know, everything is so stodgy and overproduced and it has to be perfect. And we worry about like every imperfection and everybody notices them and gets angst about at a big live event. And, you know, and I think with the amount of time people are spending on Zoom and meeting or Google Meet and everything else, I hope the bar is dropped and we can just like we can not worry so much about, you know, those things and have just conversations and like you would in real person. I mean, you're going to make mistakes. It's okay. As Greg said, lighting's not going to be perfect. Somebody's video is going to freeze. Somebody's audio is going to sound bad. Somebody's going to be in a dark room. Okay, it's not the end of the world, people. We're okay.
Yeah.
My back panel told me we're getting too nerdy. For the hardcore people who are still sticking around, we appreciate it. Sarah, I hope I answered your question. I think I gave the example of there was a YouTube video I watched with the 11 tips on how to be a good presenter. It was designed for teachers, but I thought it was a great example as well. Hopefully that was the question you were asking.
Nobody else wants to jump on with us? Come on, there's still 50 of you out there.
Jumping on and being a co-panelist.
I know, it's chatting. Now, we're just chatting now. We can answer any question you want. A lot of good comments, just kind of like the mixed modality. Do different things. I mean, it's not to Greg's point. I mean, you even if it's video is good, but sometimes people get tired of being on video or watching a talking head. Then you can just throw some content, make some interesting videos. If you had production budget for your big conference and it's far enough out that you have budget left, produce some real produced videos of content and put them out there, and then have opportunities to talk about it. Not the presentation type, like really, you know, just nice commercial grade videos. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do that are different. Like I said, this is an opportunity to break the things up that people probably always wanted to anyway. And then guess what you're probably going to find? You're going to find a lot of where your value really is, where your margins really are, and you might actually cut things that just don't provide either one of those things, value or revenue.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love the one of the ideas you shared earlier, David. I think in this idea that, you know, in an in-person event, you know, you got to schedule it, promote it, get people to actually show up. But in a virtual event, the opportunity cost for the event organizers and the attendees is so much lower. So like what you're saying, you can kind of fuel these conversations and create community where I like, you know, I'm seeing some of these names that people have never met in real life, but we're all in these events or these virtual these webinars on virtual events, and it's amazing. You know, running into people virtually has never been this easy.
Yeah. And a shout out to the few people that I saw for the hour on the earlier event and now for an hour and a half on our event, because I recognize some names that were on the ASA Foresight Works besides Greg and myself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great to see.
We have somebody else, Brian. Brent. There's Brent. There you go. Come on in, Brent.
Thanks for letting me join, y'all.
Yeah.
I gotta head out. I got another meeting.
Thanks.
See you later.
Alexis. Oh, did we lose him?
Did we lose Brent? There's Brent.
Beam him in.
He's in. There's Brent.
Mr. McConnell.
Hey guys.
Hello.
Long-time listener, first-time caller. No, this was a great presentation. I think it's a really good example of how fun and interactive you can make these events. A couple things stood out to me. I want to get your thoughts on, Greg and Liam. You know, first of all, we've got all this content pushed into traditionally a couple days, right? And we're talking about spreading it out over time. And so if we were to kind of take a cumulative marketing approach, like how could you repurpose that content in other places, you know, beyond the obvious? What are some creative ideas you have?
Yeah, I'll go first. I mean, I think so, you know, looking back at the traditional on-demand models, that maps really well to this stuff, right? A lot of things that used to happen just one time in person in that hotel conference room or in that space or whatever is now available to many more people whenever they need it. So again, that kind of concept of broadening out that reach. Right, for folks that never would have come, or for folks that couldn't come at that day, or for folks that couldn't come for 8 hours of that day, or whatever their particular issue was. But then also, you've now got this content generated, and actually something I didn't mention earlier is that like a lot of folks that come to us as first-time clients to launch an LMS, and they're moving in that space, but don't necessarily have a specific online education program, or they don't have a certificate. They come to us with hours of video content from meetings, hours of video content from past conferences. That's where a lot of organizations' educational programs evolve from. So looking at not just having, you can get that session for the next 12 months or whatever, but looking at, we created this great content here, and how can we now repurpose that content into other things that can be of further value for our members in a course or a certificate or a product or a book or, you know, whatever it might be that is another area that the association is operating in.
I'll give you my take, Brent, and great question. I like to think of myself as a person from the internet, and I go to the internet when I have questions about things, and if you've ever fallen down a YouTube hole, you know how deep it can go. I was watching videos about engineering for bridges for like hours the other day. Your content, you assume, is only relevant to your members and the people in your industry and in your niche. Put that content out there and let the world consume it, and they'll find great stuff and nuggets out there. Just because I'm not an engineer and I'm not a member of the American Society of Engineering doesn't mean I don't want to watch content about engineering for bridges. Like, I was enthralled by that content. I would love to fall down a rabbit hole on process manufacturing and how conveyor belts work for 10 hours. Like, that'd be a super cool afternoon. And I got nothing but time on Saturday right now. Give me access to the content that you would traditionally think is gated and is boring for non-members. Put that out there and allow the public to consume it. You're gonna expand your audience. You're gonna find people who were excited about your content that you never knew were excited about it, and get people to engage in your content that you never thought were gonna engage in it. But don't forget, use that as a hook. Ask me for my email address, ask me for my name, direct me to your website, give me the opportunity to participate in other ways. After I watch all those videos about a bridge, I wanna go to your website and learn how I can buy a book about a bridge or access a speaker or content that's behind a gate. Ask for my email address so I can sign up for the next time you have a webinar about a bridge.
So Greg, with zero idea how I got there and what my path was, when I got there, I watched 7 consecutive videos because they were linked on how to build a putting green. And I have no idea how I got to that on YouTube. It was like, I was like, oh, I've really always wanted to know how putting greens are built. And then it was just a series of videos. They were all like 2 minutes, just kept me going. Like 2 quick minutes, 2 quick minutes, 2 quick minutes. It was a series.
That's actually, you're touching on a great point there too, which is also, you created these sessions in person. Your session was an hour, right? Or 45 minutes or 50 minutes, right? Like how many 2-minute tidbits can you get out of that? How many 5-minute tidbits can you get out of that? And maybe that's now promotional material for you, right?
Yep.
So absolutely thinking about like, this mode worked well for this content at this length. How can we put it into another space and take advantage of it again?
Yeah, once again, when we're limited by time in the confines of a room and session hours, we have to think one way. But when we literally have no limits and no barriers, you got to think on that construct. And it's not just dumping this over there. It's really like, what are all the powers of this construct? It is that people watch things and people binge watch things. People watch things at odd hours of the night. People link to things and have no idea how they got there. People's attention span is this big. So you have to play with all of those things and think about how you might break up your content differently and package it differently. As Greg said, 2 things you might not think are even remotely related, maybe by just virtue of people's backgrounds and personalities.
Yep.
One of the questions on the chat here was about other ways to get networking. How do you create that running into people in the corridor effect? And I'll give you some easy ways to do that. You know, we've been to sessions where you can sit wherever you want for lunch at the conference. And I've been to events now where they start to put table cards and say, hey, if you want to talk about this at lunch, come sit at this table. We're all going to talk about it. Do that with your Zoom rooms. Zoom has these sub rooms now. You can do breakout rooms. Have 10 breakout rooms with self-identified topics and allow people to go into those. The other option is just to make it random. There's video technology out there that'll connect one member with another random member. And they pop in the video chat and you talk to each other for 10 minutes and then you pop into another video chat, right?
Speed dating.
Speed dating for your members.
Speed dating, yep.
Why are we not allowed to do that? I would love to sit here and talk to people about data all day long. I do it anyway. Let's throw some random people in the chat and let's talk about data. I'm excited about that.
It's interest matching, not speed dating.
And you know, we've been to these conferences, and traditionally, you know, it's the sessions and then the exhibit halls over here. Right. And the challenge of getting people to go to the exhibit hall. And this really seems like a unique opportunity to bring those efforts together rather than, you know, if we've all been in the exhibit hall that's been a little bare previously, especially the past couple of years.
Yeah. Well, folks, I do apologize. I'm going to need to jump. I really appreciate this opportunity to get on and chat with you. I wish I could stick around longer, but thank you again for this chance to get on and chat.
And I hope this was a good example
for people who made it this far.
Absolutely. Yeah. I hope this is a good opportunity, but that's what it would look like out in the hallway. You'd start off with everybody and people would go do their own things. And you'd have the people that want to stay there and talk and find value in conversation. So,
no, this wound up being the perfect example. Yeah, I love it. Love it. It's great.
And you guys made it easy. So thanks again.
Thanks for doing it, Brent.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Greg.
Bye, Liam.
All right, bye, everybody. Back to the real world.